The cell phone buzzed on the nightstand like an angry insect, shattering the heavy silence of 3 a.m. Arthur Lynch groped for it with his right hand, the one that still ached with a dull, familiar throb from a workplace accident 2 decades past. It wasn't a call, just one of those notifications his granddaughter, Chloe, had insisted on setting up for him. "Grandpa, it's Instagram. This way you can see our photos," she'd said, her patience endless as she guided his calloused thumb over the smooth screen. He'd asked her what the point was if no one ever posted pictures of him. She just laughed. "It's so you can see everyone else's? Silly." Now, with sleep a distant memory and the one-bedroom apartment feeling emptier than ever, he tapped the glowing icon. The first image made his breath catch. It was his son, Michael, his only son, dressed in a sharp, charcoal gray suit, his hair styled neatly, a far cry from the casual young man Arthur knew. When had he bought that suit? Why was he so dressed up? Arthur tapped again, and a second photo loaded. Michael was embracing a woman in an elegant ivory dress, lace tracing her shoulders. She held a bouquet of sunflowers, not roses. Michael was looking at her with a reverence Arthur had never seen on his face before. A cold dread began to pool in Arthur's stomach. He blinked, rapidly, as if the action would reset the screen to something that made sense. "My name is Arthur Lynch. I'm 72 years old, and I am looking at my son's wedding photos." He swiped through more. There was the happy couple cutting a 3-tiered cake, a toast with champagne flutes in a lavishly decorated hall with cascading fairy lights, people laughing, dancing. He saw the in-laws, a man in a sleek silver suit and a woman in an emerald green gown, both beaming as they hugged Michael as if he were their own. Arthur zoomed in, his trembling fingers searching the backgrounds, the reflections, for his own face, for any sign that he existed in this moment. Nothing. He checked the post's timestamp. Yesterday, 7:30 p.m. He looked at his wall clock. 3:22 a.m. He did the slow math. 8 hours. 8 hours ago, his son had pledged his life to another. 8 hours ago, he had toasted to his future. And Arthur had been here, asleep on a worn-out mattress, knowing nothing. No call, no text, not a single. "Dad, I'm getting married." He scrolled to the comments. Hundreds of them. "Congratulations. Beautiful couple." The in-laws looked so happy. That last one was a knife to the heart. The in-laws. Yes, they were there. They were present. He, the father who had worked 40 years in a textile factory to put food on the table, the man who had raised Michael alone after cancer took his wife, Clara, wasn't even a footnote. He put the phone down, face up, then immediately snatched it back, devouring the 30 images again. This couldn't be real. It had to be a cruel dream. But the proof was right there, in vibrant color on the cold, glass screen. His son had a new family now, a better family, and Arthur had been deliberately, completely erased. As the first light of dawn crept into his lonely apartment, Arthur didn't feel the sharp sting of pain yet, only a numb, chilling disbelief. But a single, burning thought began to form in the silence. The house Michael lived in, the one Arthur had poured his entire life into, was still legally his. And for the first time, he wondered what it would feel like to take something back. The photos on the screen blurred as Arthur's mind drifted back, 40 years through the fog of memory. He saw himself at 17, fresh off the farm, strong back and willing hands his only currency. The textile mill was loud, the air thick with lint, but it was a paycheck. Lynch, move those bales to the loading dock. He'd do it, summer heat or winter chill, his hands growing raw and permanently stained. He did it all for one reason. Michael. He looked at his own hands now, resting on his knees. A network of scars and calluses. A permanently bent ring finger from where a loom shuttle had snapped closed. These hands had never held a pen for a fancy degree, but they had signed countless overtime slips to pay for Michael's engineering textbooks. He remembered when Michael was 9, coming home from school in tears because the other kids mocked his worn-out, too big sneakers. "They said they're from the trash, Dad." That night, Arthur worked a double shift, his body screaming in protest. The next day, he took his son to the store and bought him the most expensive, brand-name sneakers they had. They cost a week's wages. But the radiant joy on Michael's face was worth every aching muscle. For 25 years, he'd saved. While his co-workers bought new trucks or went on fishing trips, Arthur put every spare dollar into an old metal lockbox hidden in his closet. "Not going this year, Art," they'd ask. "Maybe next." He'd always reply, though next never came. Every dollar was a brick in the future he was building for his son. The day he walked into the real estate office, his backpack heavy with cash, was the proudest of his life. The agent showed him the small, 2-bedroom house in the Maple Creek neighborhood. It needed work, the paint was peeling and the kitchen faucet leaked, but it had a solid roof and a small, sunny backyard. "Do you want it?" the agent asked. Arthur saw Michael playing in that yard, growing up safe under that roof. Yes, he said, his voice thick with emotion. When Michael turned 30, with a new engineering diploma and a mountain of student debt, Arthur had called him over. He placed the keys on the kitchen table. "Your house," he'd said. The hug that followed felt real. Michael's tears soaked Arthur's shirt. "I'll never let you down, Dad. I promise. Never." That hug was the last time Arthur had felt like a father, not an obligation. He never transferred the deed. The process was expensive and complicated, and a small, secret part of him liked knowing that something he had built so painstakingly was still, ultimately, his. That promise, "I'll never let you down," now echoed in the empty apartment like a taunt. Arthur realized that the foundation of their relationship, built on his decades of sacrifice, had been crumbling for years, and the wedding photos were just the final, devastating collapse. But that one piece of paper, the deed, still held a power he was only beginning to understand. The distance had started subtly, 2 years ago, after Michael met Sophia. Arthur remembered the phone call. "Dad, I've met someone. Her name is Sophia. I want you to meet her." Arthur's heart had soared. But Michael didn't want to come to the house for a barbecue. He suggested a cafe downtown, a place where a cup of coffee cost more than Arthur's weekly coffee can allowance. Arthur arrived early, wearing his best shirt, the one Clara had bought him. He'd scrubbed his hands raw, though the scars and calluses remained like a topographical map of his life. When they walked in, Sophia was beautiful, poised, her posture radiating a quiet judgment. Her eyes did a slow, deliberate sweep of Arthur, pausing on his faded shirt, his rough hands. When he extended his hand, she merely nodded, her own hands staying clasped in front of her. "A pleasure," she said, her voice cool. The meeting was a disaster of monosyllabic answers and awkward silences. Arthur offered to pay, but Michael nearly snatched the bill from him. Sophia gave Michael a look of approval, as if he'd passed a test. After that, the visits became shorter. The excuses became constant. "Sorry, Dad, Sophia's family is having a dinner." Arthur cooked Michael's favorite meal, pork chops and scalloped potatoes, and set the table with the good tablecloth. The call came as the food was growing cold. "I can't, Dad. Sophia's parents invited us over." "Aren't I family too?" Arthur had asked, his voice small. "Another time, old man," Michael had replied, and hung up. The final straw was Michael's 35th birthday. Arthur spent the whole morning making his son's favorite dessert, a lemon drizzle cake, from Clara's recipe. It was lopsided, the icing a little messy, but made with love. He walked the 10 blocks to Michael's house, his arms aching from carrying the box. He found the street lined with expensive cars. Music and laughter spilled from the house. Gold and silver balloons were tied to the porch. His heart sank. He rang the bell. Michael answered, a crystal glass of whiskey in his hand. His smile vanished when he saw Arthur. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I made your cake," Arthur said, holding out the box, forcing a smile. Michael took it, glanced inside, and with a look of sheer panic, placed it on the porch floor. "Thanks, but we're in the middle of something. I'll call you later." The door closed, leaving Arthur standing alone, staring at his offering sitting on the cold concrete. Walking home in the dark, the sound of the party's laughter chasing him, Arthur felt something break. It wasn't his heart. It was something deeper, the last thread of hope. He now knew he was an embarrassment to be hidden. And the seed of a plan, cold and hard, began to take root in the fertile soil of his humiliation. In the weeks that followed, Arthur started a grim ritual. On the old free calendar from the local hardware store, he began marking each day Michael didn't call with a thick red X. The calendar soon looked like it was bleeding. 12 days. 18. 23. The red lines were a physical testament to his erasure. He finally broke on the 23rd day. "Son, it's been a while," he said when Michael answered, sounding rushed. "Yeah, Dad. Swamped at work. Do you need something? Do you need something?" The question was a dismissal. The call ended with the usual lie. "I'll call you later." He never did. Then Arthur got sick. A fever spiked to 103 degrees. Weak and trembling, he called Michael. "Son, I don't feel well. I'm really sick." "Dad, I'm at a client dinner. Make yourself some tea. Rest. I'll call you later." The line went dead. "Make yourself some tea." Arthur lay in his bed, shaking and delirious, for 3 days. He saw visions of Clara, felt sure he would die alone, his body undiscovered for days. The self-pity was a poison, but it was the clarity that came with his recovery that was truly lethal. When the fever broke, he called Michael again. "I was very sick, son. For 3 days. Alone." "That's great you're better, Dad. Listen, I'm in the middle of something. We'll talk later." Click. That was the moment Arthur Lynch truly understood. He was no longer a father. He was a complication. His neighbor, Brenda, taught him how to use Instagram properly. "Look up your son. See what he's up to," she said cheerfully. He did. Michael's account was private. The rejection felt like a final door slamming in his face. So he created a fake account under the name John Smith, with a generic photo of a sunset. Michael accepted the request within hours, and there they were. The wedding photos. Not from a small, intimate ceremony, but a grand affair with 100 guests. The date on the post was 3 days ago. The planning would have taken months. Months of silence, of lies, of conscious exclusion. He saw a comment from the father-in-law. "Welcome to the family, son." Another from the mother. "So happy you're finally part of a family that appreciates you. A family that appreciates you." The words were a final, brutal verdict on his 40 years of fatherhood. Staring at those words, Arthur didn't feel sadness. He felt a cold, crystallizing rage. They had not just forgotten him, they had replaced him. And as he sat in the growing darkness, he knew the time for silent suffering was over. It was time to remind his son exactly where his appreciated life had come from. The phone call to Michael on his honeymoon was short and brutal. "I saw the wedding photos, Michael." A long silence. "Yes." "Why?" "It was complicated, Dad. There were 100 people there. Was I so complicated I couldn't be one of them?" Michael's voice grew tense, annoyed. "I wanted a perfect day. No complications. And you're always a complication." The word hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. A complication. Sophia and her family, they're on a different level. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I didn't want them to see you. He didn't have to finish. Arthur understood perfectly. He was an eyesore. "So you hid me," Arthur stated. "Dad, stop. It's done. I'm not talking about this." The dial tone was the sound of a relationship severing. That night, Arthur didn't sleep. He lay awake, and the plan that had been a seed now bloomed fully, dark and undeniable. He remembered the deed. He went to his closet, moved aside old boxes, and opened the small fireproof safe. There it was, beneath Clara's death certificate, the title deed for the Maple Creek house. Owner, Arthur Lynch. He called his lawyer, Mr. Davies, first thing in the morning. "I need to sell the Maple Creek property. Today." By 3 p.m., he was in Mr. Davies' office, signing papers across from a businessman named Robert Vance, who was buying the house for his daughter. Arthur signed his name 3 times, his hand steady. He watched as $55,000 in cash was counted onto the desk. It was the monetary value of his life's sacrifice. He walked to a park, sat on a bench, and made the call. "Michael, you have 15 days to vacate the house." "What? Vacate? Dad, what are you talking about? I sold it this morning." The explosion of panic, the screams, the desperate pleas, it was all a distant noise. Arthur remained calm, detached. He explained that the house was always his, legally. He explained that being erased from a son's life has consequences. "Where will I live? What will I tell Sophia?" Michael cried. "I guess you'll have to figure that out," Arthur said, and hung up. He turned off his phone, the silence finally his own. As Arthur sat in the park, the weight of the money in his jacket pocket, he felt a profound relief. But he knew this wasn't the end. He had pulled the trigger, and now he had to face the fallout. The very next morning, a frantic, furious pounding on his door announced that the reckoning had only just begun. The pounding on his door was violent, desperate. Arthur opened it to find Michael on the other side, his face a mask of sleepless rage and terror. "How could you do this to me?" Michael stormed into the apartment, his body vibrating with fury. Arthur simply sat in his armchair, the picture of calm. "How could you get married without me?" he countered, his voice low. The argument spiraled. Michael blamed Sophia, her family, the pressure. "It was just easier this way," he finally shouted, his voice breaking. Those 5 words confirmed everything. It was just easier. Arthur looked at his son, this stranger drowning in consequences, and felt nothing but a hollow pity. "Easier to erase me than to defend me," he said. "That house was a gift of love. You proved you don't love me. You love what I gave you." "I do love you," Michael sobbed, collapsing. "You're my dad. Please, don't do this." Forgive me. I can't, Arthur said softly. Forgiveness is for mistakes. This was a choice. A long, cruel choice. You have 2 weeks to move. Michael stood up, his expression shifting from despair to something cold and hard. I'm never going to forgive you for this, he said, his voice flat. That's fine, Arthur replied. I'm not going to forgive you for what you did, either. The door closed with a soft, final click. Arthur stood in the middle of his modest living room, waiting for the guilt, the regret, the pain to wash over him. But it didn't come. Instead, a deep, profound silence filled the space, and then a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The house was gone. His son was gone, in every way that mattered. But he had gotten himself back. He had reclaimed the dignity he had begged his son to see for so long. Sitting in his old armchair, he finally understood that living without self-respect wasn't living at all. It was merely surviving on crumbs. Sometimes, getting your dignity back costs you everything. But as Arthur looked out his window at the world continuing indifferently, he knew it was a price he was finally willing to pay. Arthur had found his peace, but the story of a shattered family is never truly over. The sale of the house was just the first tremor. What would Michael do when faced with true homelessness? And how would Sophia and her powerful family react when their perfect world was threatened? The battle for dignity was over, but the war for consequences was just beginning.